Hi everyone, welcome to my series on JavaScript and jQuery programming, and today's discussion is on arrays. We're going to discuss what are arrays, how to use arrays, what are different functions that are provided in arrays, and how to update and modify and work with arrays. So let's begin. Okay, so let's start with JavaScript first. Let's start by creating a simple array. Now, what is an array? Array is nothing but a collection of values in a single variable. So we can have a variable var1 with the value test1, and we can have one more variable var2 with the value test2, and a third variable var3, the value test3. Now, if we have these values in three separate variables, there is no way to loop through these values. If we have to work on these values as a collection, there is no way to do that because these values are in three different variables. So array basically is a collection of different values in a single variable. So how do we define arrays? So instead of writing like this, we say var array equal to square brackets test1. So we no longer need multiple variables in order to store these three values. The three values are now part of the single variable, which is our array variable. Now, how do you define arrays? How do you initialize arrays with values? So, to start with, we can define an array. If we know the values beforehand, we can define an array just like this. But let's say we don't know the values. We can simply define an array by saying var array equal to square brackets, and so this basically creates a blank array object. And then we can initialize the values in this array by saying var array square bracket of 0 index equal to test1. We need to remember that an array always starts with the index 0. Every value in an array is represented by an index position. So this is 0 position, this is 1, this is 2, and so on. So similarly, we can say var array 1 equal to test2, and same way for test3, 4, 5. Now since we are able to assign values to an array in this syntax, it's very clear that if we want to update a value of the array, suppose this array has three values. Position 0 has test1, 1 has test2, and 2 has test3. Now we want to update any particular index of the array with a new value. So the same way we have to use this syntax and put the new value over here. So this is how we declare array, initialize the array, and update values to an array. So now that we have updated the arrays with 3 or 4 values, let's try to display the array. So we use the alert function and we pass the array name. So what happens is it does an implicit conversion of the entire array into a string by separating each values with comma. So let's see how it works. Just refresh the page and it says test1 updated value test3. So if you remember, the second value we replaced with a new value. So initially it was test1, test2, and test3. We replaced the second value with updated value. So it displays the entire array in a comma separated manner. Now once we have the array, we can also get the length of the array. So a length of an array, let me just remove this updated value from here and let there be 3 values. Now a length of the array is the number of elements in the array. So we can say alert var array dot length. Save it and refresh the page. We have test1, test2, test3, the original values, and then it says 3, which is basically the length of that array, the number of items in that array. We can also sort the values in the array. So let me just shuffle the values a little bit. Let me put test5 over here, test2 over here, and then test1 over here. And then let's put the function sort. So instead of putting an alert, let me just invoke the sort method for this array. Now the sort method of the array sorts the array elements and rearranges their position within the array. So let me just remove the length for the time being, and we have the sort over here, and let me just alert the same array once again. So this alert is before the sort and this is after the sort. Let's see what happens. Go back to the page, refresh the page. You see we have test5, test2, and then test1. That's the initial order. It's basically not in sorted order. And then we click on OK, and then after sorting, the values have been rearranged to test1, test2, and test5. So this is how the sort function of an array sorts the array elements within the array and then rearranges the index position of those elements. Now, one thing we need to note here is, since the index of an array always starts with a 0, it's very clear that the last element of the array is at the position which is 1 less than the length of the array. So basically, if we say variable arr length equal to var variable array dot length, then just alert variable array, and in the index just put arr length -1, save it, go back to our page and refresh the page, and it gives test1, and test1 is nothing but the last element of the array in the unsorted original manner. So if we have to loop through this array, it's very clear now that if you use a for loop, so I have explained for loop in a different video, please refer that. But if I am using a for loop over here, let's say I equal to 0, I less than arr length, so it's always going to be less than this. It will never reach the length value because the last element will be 1 less than the length. And then I plus plus, and inside that we can alert the different values of an array using the array name, and square brackets we can just put I, the loop counter. Let me just comment this and go back to our page and refresh. So we have test5 and then test2 and then test1. So the 3 values of the array are getting looped and getting displayed. So this is how the array indexes range from 0 all the way to length -1 for any array. Now if we want to add or remove values from this array dynamically, we can also use the push and pop functions, which are basically the functions for our normal stack operations. So if we have to use the pop functions, we have already seen how to get the length of an array and then use the length in a for loop to loop through the different values of an array. So we know that our array contains 3 values, test5, test2, and test1. So if I'm going to use a var array dot pop over here and run the same code, we have test5 and then test2, and then we don't have anything else, which means that test1 has been removed from the array. So that's what pop does. The last element to be added to the array goes out first in the pop function. Similarly, if we have to push an value to the array, so instead of removing anything, let's try to add a new value. Let's try to add test7, save it, and then run the same code. So we have test5, we have test2, test1, and then test7. So the new element gets added to the end of the array, which means that dynamically, so on the screen in the code we can see that this array contains 3 elements, but now during runtime a 4th element gets added at position 3 of this array, and that is getting displayed by the for loop. Now one more way to loop through the elements of an array is to use the for each function. So what we can do is, instead of using the for loop, let me just comment this using a multi-line comment. This is how we set multi-line comments in JavaScript. Let me just define a simple function. Loop array and parameter value, and alert the value over here. And this function we can assign to the for each property of the array. So let's just keep pushing an array, pushing this test7 to the array, and then the array length will be 4. Then here we are going to dot for each okay, let's see how it works. So we have test5, test2, test1, and test7. So all the values of the array are popping up. So there are 2 ways in JavaScript we can loop through arrays. One is the for and other is the for each. Now let me just remove all these things. If you have to alert the type of the array variable, So in JavaScript we use the type of operator to display the type of any given variable. So if you use var array and then run the code, you see that it says object, it doesn't actually say array. Now how to differentiate between objects and arrays in JavaScript? So for that we have a different function under array, which is array. Now this array function returns true if a particular variable is identified as an array. Run the code again and it says true over here. So which means that this var array has been identified not just as an object, even arrays are objects, but it's not just as an object but an array kind of object. So that's what the array.isArray function does. It returns true if it identifies an array. Now we have already seen how we can alert the entire content of the array just by writing the name of the array in the alert function. It converts the entire array into a string where the elements are separated by commas. But what if you don't want comma? What if you want your own separator? So in that case you can use a join method and you can provide the separator right here. So let me just put instead of comma, let me just put a dollar over here and save it. Go back to the page and refresh. So if you see, the values of the array are separated by dollar and they are displayed as a single continuous string. So this is how you can use the join operator. Let me just try to put a space for better readability and then run the code again, and you can see test5, $test2, $test1. So this is the way you can use join to convert the array into a single string by using your own choice of separator. Okay, so let's remove this. Now we have already seen how the push and pop operations work on an array. So if you want to push an element to the end of an array, so suppose we have 0, 1, 2 and then at index 3 you want to add an element, you can use the push operation. And if you want to remove the last element of the array, you can use the pop operation. But what if you want to add element at the beginning of an array, or you want to remove the first element of the array? So these two functions have an equivalent functions called shift and unshift. So let's see how these work. So given an array of 3 elements at position 0, 1, 2, if I have to remove the first element and move the remaining elements basically towards the beginning, test2 will become element at 0, test1 will become element at position 1. In that case we use the shift. So var dot shift. And now let's try to alert this same array. Let's alert that with a join so that we can put our own delimiter, and let's use dollar. Go back to the page, refresh the page, and we have test2 and test1. So how did that happen? The original array had test5, 2 and 1. 5 was the element 0, the first element. When we do a shift, it removes the first element. So when we do pop, if you remember the pop operation, it removes the last element of the array. But shift does the exact opposite. It removes the first element of the array and moves all the elements towards the first position. So test2 becomes element 0, test1 becomes element 1, and so on. And the same way, if we have to add an element, so let's try to do a unshift over here and let's add test0. Go back to the page and refresh. Now we have test0, 5, 2 and 1. 4 elements. How did that happen? So when we did unshift of test0 to this array, test0 became the first element, and then test5, then test2, then test1. So the length of the array became 4, and then test0 became the element 0. So push and pop and shift and unshift, they work on either the last elements or the first elements of an array in case you want to add or remove elements. Now let's say we want to merge two different arrays. So we have the first array variable defined over here already, and let's say the next array variable is 2. So let me just declare the array variable array2. It's an array object, and then we have position 0, we have value 1. So we have two arrays now, variable array and variable array2. Variable array contains 3 elements and variable array2 contains 4 elements. Now we can actually concatenate both the arrays and display them together by saying variable array dot concat variable array 2. Let's go back and refresh the page, and you see test 5 to 1 are from the first array, and then value 1, 2, 3, 4 are from the second array. So this is how you can concat two or more array values or array variables into a single string. So what if we had 3 arrays? So let's consider one more array. So this should be variable array 3 and 3 over here. Now let's just run the code again. So we have the elements of the first array, then we have the elements of the second array, and then of course we have the element of the third array as well. So this is how we can use the concat function to join multiple arrays into a single string. Let's look at one more interesting function called slice. Let me just remove all this and come back to our basic array, and let's just increase the elements to 5. So we have till 2, we add 3 and 4, and let this be in order 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So the function we are going to see now is called slice. So we define a variable called new array equal to var array dot slice, and we mention an index position. So let's say we put 2 over here, and then when we do the alert of the new array, let's see what happens. So we have test 3, 4 and 5. So the elements that are coming out of the new array are test 3, test 4 and test 5. So what's going on exactly? The slice operation, the slice method, creates another array from the existing array by taking elements starting from the index mentioned. So if this is our original array with 5 elements and we have mentioned slice 2, then starting from the third element, which is at index position 2, it creates a brand new array and it assigns that array to this new array variable, but it's not going to delete the existing array elements. The existing array elements are going to be retained, but the new array element is going to contain the value starting from the index position, which is mentioned over here as a parameter. So that's what the slice function does. It also takes a second parameter, which is the, so let's try putting 4 over here and save it, and we have test 3 and test 4. So when we put 4 over here, it takes this index and it does not include that index because the starting position is 2 and then the number of elements that is returned is 2 and 3. The second element, the second parameter, is basically the index before which the array should stop. You can also consider this to be the actual position of the element till which the new element has to be created. So if you see 4 here, and if you count the number of elements 1, 2, 3 and 4, this is the fourth element. So starting index position is 2 and the ending position is fourth element, which is 3. So basically this is how the slice method works, where it takes two parameters, the starting index and the ending element, which is basically the element identified by reducing this value by 1. It does not include this element, but it stops before the element by 1. So 2 and 3 are now part of the new array. So that is how the slice operation works. Now we have already seen the sort operation earlier, where we sorted the elements in alphabetical order and then rearranged the elements and their indexes within the array. But what if these values were numeric values? So let's say we have 100 over here and we have 20, let's put 30 over here, we have 115 over here, and then let's say we have 90 right here. Now all these are numeric values. Let's see what happens when we do a variable array dot sort and then alert the values of the array. So if you see here, the values are still getting sorted in the alphabetical order. The lowest value in a numeric representation is 20, and then it should be 30, then 90, and then 100, and then 115. But since in alphabetical order 1 comes before 2, 2 comes before 3, and 3 comes before 9, the values are sorted in this manner. First we have 100, then 115, then 20, then 30, and then 90. So how to avoid that? How to force an array in doing a numeric sort? So for that we use a function over here with parameters a, b, and we say return a minus b. Save it. Let's go back to our page and refresh the page, and we see now that the numbers are ordered in the actual numeric order in which they should be: 20, 30, 90, 100 and 115. Now if we have to do this in the descending order, all we have to do is change a minus b to b minus a, and then when we refresh the page, of course we have 115 and then 100 and then 90, 30 and 20. So this is how you can sort elements in the actual numeric representation instead of the alphabetical order. The last function that we are going to see is the reverse function. So reverse, as it's very much clear, it just reverses the position of the elements within the array. So right now 100 is the first value in the array and 90 is the last value. So let's just try to alert this value before and after reverse. Refresh the page and we have 100, 20, 30, 115 and 90, and then we click on OK, and then we have the exact opposite. We have 90, 115, 30, 20 and 100. So that's how reverse works. It reverses the sequence of elements within the array. So the first element becomes last and last becomes first and so on. So this is how you can use array functions, array methods, array values in JavaScript. Let's see how these work in jQuery. So let's remove these statements and let's just keep a script tag over here, and let's put our jQuery document.ready construct. We put a function over here and close the function right here. Now in jQuery the declaration and initialization of arrays still remain same. So let's try to loop through the values of this array in jQuery using the $.each, and we have function index value and let's alert the index plus value. Refresh the page and it says 0 is 100, 1 is 20, 2 is 30, 3 115, 4 90, and if you go back and check, all the values are correctly getting displayed. So all the functions that we have discussed till now in JavaScript are applicable in jQuery as well. jQuery, since it's a object, we can use the $.each function to loop through the arrays in using the index and value parameters. Now in jQuery you can also search for a specific item in the array and find the positions. Let's say you want to search for 115 in the array. So all you have to do is $.inArray, and the parameters are the search item, which is 115, and the array variable in which you want to search. And if you alert this, then this should give the position of that value which is searched in the array. Let's see how it works. Refresh the page and it gives 3. So if you come back to the array, you see that at index position 3 we have 115. So depending on the library that you're using, you may find few more customized functions of arrays, but the basic functions that we have discussed in JavaScript, all the functions are applicable in jQuery as well. So this is how we can use arrays. This is how we can update, manipulate, work on these arrays in JavaScript and jQuery. Just try it out on your own, and if you face any issues, let me know in the comment section. I'll be happy to help you out. Thank you.